Many of them still linger around the front bench of this now opposition. I can tell that Carolyn Ward stood up with myself, with Senator Murray Watt, with Matt Burnett, Labor's candidate for Flynn, when we announced an urgent critical care unit that will be in Bundaberg to relieve pressure off the emergency department. And Carolyn broke down into tears when the journo said, "Is this a state government problem?" And she said, no, it is a Scott Morrison failure. That's what's putting the pressure onto our nurses. That's what's putting the pressure onto our health system. What about the fact that they walk away from flood victims? Not just recent flood victims, but flood victims from Bundaberg in 2013, refusing to fund the #1 flood mitigation project in this state. Instead, they give 3 projects up in the far north to Bob Katter. Now, Bob Katter's worked very, very hard for that. That's fine. But how do you not support the #1 or #2 flood mitigation project in Queensland? It's simply not good enough. What we have is a federal member in Hinkler who's given $40 million to his Fraser Coast council mates to build the new Taj Mahal so that his council mates can look out over Gari and see what a wonderful view. Meanwhile, people in my community, next time that flood comes, 600 properties will be inundated by the flood waters. Schools will be inundated, will be completely forgotten again if this Scott Morrison government stays there. We need a new federal government in Queensland.
Time's expired. Order. Call the member from Maroochydore.
Well, who on earth are they going to blame if there's a change of government? Because ultimately, service delivery, infrastructure construction is the responsibility of the state government. When I have a lady with ovarian cancer who was trying to get her cancer surgery, Category 1, urgently, have it cancelled twice, Category 1 surgery. You can't blame the federal government for that. Shame. That's this Labor government. Shame. I went into bat. We fought to get her an operation. Now, a local member shouldn't have to do that. The system should work. But for someone with ovarian cancer who's in pain, who doesn't know what their prognosis would be even with the surgery, to have their surgery cancelled twice, this is in the last few weeks, and then when they finally got that operation set again, and they said to me afterwards, and you know what, I got down to Brisbane from the Sunshine Coast for this particular operation in the public sector under this government, and they said, oh, you don't have cancer. She had to go through it all again. So what on earth is going on with this mob? You can't run the chook raffle and it's costing people's lives. We've seen it with ambulance ramping. Can't blame the federal government for that. It's this government's responsibility. Do your job. You can't blame the federal government for that dear woman with ovarian cancer, Category 1 surgery, in pain, having a surgery cancelled twice. Finally, she got her operation, but at what cost with a delay? And how many others? Do your job, Labor government, Labor ministers. Can't blame other people for your ineptitude. And let's talk about other issues with infrastructure delivery. Now, we know that ultimately the federal government can hand over money to the state government to deliver infrastructure, but this Labor government has been slow to roll it out. We've seen $1.6 billion has been offered by the federal government for the Queensland, for the Sunshine Coast rail extension to Maroochydore. It needs the state government to step up and do its job, because the rail projects have to be delivered by the state government. But still we see this government trying to blame everybody else and not saying, great, let's get on with it, let's set a date, let's build this rail. No, they're playing politics. We've seen the same situation with the rail duplication to the Sunshine Coast. The federal government stepped in and provided 50% of the funding for that duplication, even though it's not their role to fund that particular type of infrastructure, but they've done it, and still this government's late and rolling it out. Do your job. Pick up your act. Infrastructure costs are blowing out in this state because Labor mates have a favoured corridor that they walk in the shadows where they get their deals done and they get paid for it.
Time's expired. I call the member for Aspley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I support this motion. Next weekend, Australians have a great opportunity to kick this bumbling, stumbling Morrison government out of office and put the missed opportunities of the last decade behind us. The last 9 years have seen wages stagnate, climate change action grind to a halt, infrastructure money for Queensland pushed off again and again, and excuses piling up. This Abbott Trust, Turnbull Joyce, Turnbull McCormick, Morrison Joyce government has run out of puff. This government has spent the last decade being dragged kicking and screaming to every hard decision along the way. From net zero to same-sex marriage to royal commissions into the banking sector, aged care and veteran suicides.
Order, members.
This government only ever
Order.
is forced to. Australia has dragged this government along behind itself, not the other way around. And the rot started early. Tony Abbott's first budget in 2014 still sends shivers up the spines of many Australians. There's no wonder it's roundly condemned, from funding cuts to the ABC to Peter Dutton's $7 GP tax.